So we're talking about balancing the scale of power to really make our elected officials accountable to all. And that when they do make the decision, that we believe that the decision was based purely on the merits. And that in no way, shape, or form in my mind would I believe that it was because those 999 votes were going to be affecting his or her political future.
Yeah, I just want to give one example of that, but I'm always talking about this. He's absolutely right. And I have to say, again, this is Brooklyn. I know the Bronx is absolutely clean. But I lived, almost lived through a situation where we were ignored. The Latino community was ignored. The only group that counted here was the seat. To be very honest with you, we don't dare to have a coalition with us, so I'm not talking about the fact that we aren't working with them and doing lots of good stuff. But I'm simply telling you that they mobilized that vote in such a way so that the politicians didn't care about us at all.
Just have one statement, question, so like the last one. So like I said before, 45 countries, we said, implemented a system where non-citizens have the right to vote, and also these other states, right? So I'm just thinking, I just don't understand why, if there's an actual physical model that has been established, why can't that, in a progressive state, such as New York, why hasn't that already been implemented? I feel like this conversation, no offense, but I feel like this conversation is just dated. I feel that we can be focusing on other issues, such as in healthcare or education. Not that this isn't an issue, but I just feel like this conversation had taken place years ago, and it just doesn't seem like, it feels like we're behind the times, seeing that in New York City, that is supposedly a sophisticated city, that's progressive, and so forth, is having this conversation today. That's my statement. Have a good night.
So we're going to go right into the closing statements here. Before we do, I just want to encourage the panelists to talk in their closing statements for about a minute and a half about the need for public education. And not necessarily repeat anything that you've said here before, but this also gets at the issue that the young woman just mentioned. I think from my perspective, and this is why Citizens Union is doing this, is to be informed and educated, but also to use these forums as an opportunity to inform and educate others. There's a huge public education effort needed for this to not only pass, but to succeed. Simply getting legislation passed doesn't mean that the battle has been won. I think, on one side of the spectrum, there's a very strong vocal core of supporters pushing this. On the other side is a core of opponents who, would oppose this on many different grounds, just because it's something that threatens their very power. In the middle is this huge swath of New Yorkers. They're progressive, they're conservatives, they're moderates, they're from all ethnicities. There are immigrant advocates who don't support non-citizen voting. So I've talked to someone who I'm just stunned. She's a national leader, but she doesn't support non-citizen voting. I think there are a lot of people out there who are in the middle, in a very large middle. And there needs to be a lot of public education around this. And I, as a political activist for decades, just as long as Louise, I've learned a couple of things. And one of them is to build the foundation for a victory in order to fully achieve it. And to not to move too fast. How do we, ensure that if this does come to fruition and the city council does act and the mayor does sign it, that it succeeds, that it doesn't result in a backlash, that it doesn't result in a voter referendum that repeals it? Should we have a voter referendum to win this in order to get the support of the public? Because I think that on the surface, they're in this friendly crowd, we would be surprised to learn any strong opponents to this. But trust me, they're out there. And then once this issue becomes more visible and part of the public dialogue, we will see opposition to this in a very significant way. How does the mind to organize and win this, fight that, and ensure not that just we win this issue, but we can claim the victory for all time. And by asking that question doesn't necessarily mean that citizens usually support it. I'm just asking a challenge.
So now I'd like to ask all panelists for 30 seconds to talk about this public education piece. So let's go ahead and start with Steve down here. 30 seconds.
Don't count There's an immigration professor of law named Hiroshi Motomura, and he recently spoke at New York Law School, and he said that there's a fundamental tension between the idea of equality in a liberal democracy and the idea of the borders. Right? There's a fundamental tension between this idea that everyone's the same, that everyone's equal, and the idea that some are more equal than others because of the borders. And I think that we need to confront that contradiction as a society. And I think one of the reasons I've been so drawn to non-citizen voting as an issue and pulled to support it so much is because I think it, like so few other issues, it gets right to that point and confronts this idea that we're either equal human beings or we're not. And there's something that disturbs that idea about the borders and about immigration.
Thank you, Steve.
Well, I think that, passing that legislation is the beginning of a long, drawn battle that is up to organizations such as El Puente, Los Sures, Southside Mission, and so forth, to do two things. To ensure that those that get the right to vote utilize and exercise that right to vote. Otherwise, the naysayers will say, you see, it was not necessary. And two, to ensure that those that do vote do it appropriately, to reduce fraud and to educate our people. I want to thank Dick and the Citizens Union for opening the conversation, and I'm hoping that this is at the beginning of a larger dialogue that we, as community organized organizations, need to continue in the days and the months and the years to come.
Thank you, Kevin.
So there are 2 points I would quickly make. The first is that we need to make sure we have these conversations. It's not just painted as this is good for the immigrant community because the immigrant voice will be heard and we will get things, but that this is good for New York City as a whole. When people are engaged and part of the community, active and ownership, and are speaking out in a common, united voice, I think they stand more to gain, and I think that's a point that we need to make sure people are hearing, so it's not an us versus them. The other is to not just look at this in an immigrant context, but in terms of what it means to have a stable, functioning democracy and the role of having inclusion in that. I think that anything that we do that expands the electorate in a legal and thoughtful way is the way to go, and is only good for our country and our democracy. And I think that's really the underlying point here, beyond ethnicity, beyond Latino, beyond Dominican. This is about good government, it's about democracy, and expansion of rights that will ultimately benefit all of us.
Thank you, Michael.
I would encourage everyone to take this conversation to your neighbors, to your family, talk about it, educate, and organize. I think we need to have one New York City, hopefully united by citizenship, but united in moving forward and having a proper discussion so we can come to a proper conclusion.
Thank you, Luis.
The overwhelming majority of eligible voters in America don't vote. Puerto Rico is really honest. I read an article in the newspaper that said, oh my God, we're in the 80s. Those 80-something% of eligible voters in Puerto Rico right now versus 95% when I was a kid. So look at that. And if we're talking about education data, we really have to talk about education. Because the reason why Americans aren't voting is because they're disconnected. And one of the major reasons why they're disconnected is because the public school system has failed. It has failed because what happens to young kids, you can see them in kindergarten, first grade, learning about the country, and they're very excited. By the 12th grade, they're college. They don't even know who their representatives are, they don't care, they don't want to vote. They don't want to connect themselves. They're not aspiring to vote. So I think if we're really committed to the question of educating potential citizens or citizens, that we start with dealing with the failure of our school system to really create community and expand our democracy.
Thank you, Luis. And as I close tonight's forum, one thing that I would say is, in our experience as the New York Immigration Coalition, With our member agencies, we have nearly 165 member agencies all across the state. I would like to see all the energy and thought that goes into this issue. Quite frankly, I'd like to see that translate into breaking down civic engagement and voter barriers, no matter if you're in favor of non-citizen voting or if you're not. I will tell you right now that we have seen, through our member agencies, we've seen hostile poll workers, we've seen mistranslated ballots, we have seen all these sorts of arcane board of elections rules that say that if you want to switch party, you can't vote for a year. So I would love to see all this energy and all this thought on this, no matter which side of this issue we stand on, that we engage, that we make sure that our voter participation rate is high, and that we indeed have good governance all across the city in this great state. So this is the second of 5 forums we're going to be having. We're going to be having starting in December. So I want to thank El Puente for hosting this, and I would like to thank all of you coming out tonight. And
just want to emphasize that Debbie's here, our chief organizer in the community. That we're going to get together with Father Tony, with Amon, Southside Mission.
we're going to do this again.
And we're going to put together committees and decide on a date, probably after the holidays.
Great.
To fill this place and really have a kind of discussion, invite people back. So basically, I'm asking you all to become organizers for that date.
Yes, and that's a wonderful note to close on. Our partner in this, Citizens Union, we're going to work together with them to make sure that the voice of the community is heard and is reflected in what happens in the city. So thank you again for everyone for showing up tonight, and good night.